Welcome to Session 8 of the Lighthouse Harbor Church membership class. This is going to be corresponding to Section 7 of the membership class packet, and that is our structure. Our structure. We believe the structure of the church should not be determined by culture or business practices or even denominational traditions, but only by the Bible. Only by the Bible. We believe there are various levels of authority and accountability outlined in Scripture. These offices, as they're called, of the church, are clearly displayed, for example, in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 13. We're not going to read that in its entirety, but I would encourage you to go check that out if you're unsure about this. But our basic structure is this. We have at the top, we have pastors, and I'll explain why I say kind of. We have pastors. Pastors at the top of the structure. The pastors are the primary leaders of the church. They teach, lead, and direct the church. Those are their primary responsibilities. They are accountable to one another and to the congregation as a whole. These men are also called overseers, elders, and shepherds in the Bible. And so we have pastors at the top, but they're accountable to the congregation as a whole. The congregation must approve and ordain the pastors, and then they are responsible to be submitted to the pastors. Now, in the case that a pastor steps out of line, in the sense of a very serious and disqualifying sin or series of sins, then the church has the ability to recall that pastor, to remove him from his post, and to strip that authority from him, so that it's a two-way street. Pastors aren't given this wide-ranging authority to just do whatever they want, but they're accountable to the church, and the church is able to remove them as needed and to appoint them and ordain them as needed, and then they, sort of in a marriage sense, the church then submits to the leadership of the pastors that they have chosen and voluntarily submitted themselves to. Next is deacons. Deacons are servants of the church, and you'll see servants in quotes there because the word deacon literally means servant. It's the Greek word diakonos, which we just borrowed straight out of the Greek, and it means servant. And so deacons are servants of the church. They are meant to be men who, these are not guys who are teaching, these are not guys who are setting the direction of the church, but they are carrying out the more practical aspects of church life, helping to make sure people are cared for, helping to make sure our finances are well cared for, helping to make sure our building is well cared for, and some of our ministries are well cared for. Deacons are meant to be servants of the church. Now, not servant in a low sense. It's a servant in a high sense. Right? This is a place of honor, and it is a position that a man has to be or a woman has to be qualified for. We do allow for female deacons here as well. This is something they have to be qualified for. They can't just, it's not just any old person who wants to serve. Now, we welcome you to serve, and we want you to serve, but there are some positions, and some particularly of leadership, that are reserved for those who are qualified, and those would be deacons. And they're accountable to pastors and then to the congregation as a whole. So pastors have some authority over the deacons in setting their responsibilities, their areas of leadership. But also then the church is the one who ordains and can also remove deacons if they were to disqualify themselves or fail to live up to the standard that they have agreed to. Next is lay leaders. And this is not explicitly given this title in the Bible, but this is the title that we would give it. Lay leaders. It's those who teach and lead in various areas within the church on a lower level. So these are people who are accountable to the pastors and to the congregation as a whole as well. Examples of this would be like somebody who teaches or leads a Bible study, or somebody who's on the worship team. These are people who have agreed to a higher standard, but they aren't deacons and they're not elders or pastors. They are lay leaders. And then lastly is members. And lastly, but not lastly. Right? Lastly in the structure, but it's still incredibly important, are just the members. And they're accountable to the pastors, the deacons, lay leaders, and to one another. Like there are these various levels of authority. So that's our basic structure. We have pastors who lead and teach, deacons who lead various practical ministries and who help to carry those out within the church. Then we have lay leaders who fill certain areas of leadership that aren't necessarily deacon level, but that are important and they're held to a certain standard. And then we have members who agree to the most basic standard and who are incredibly important and have the authority to remove any of these people and to appoint really any of these people. And yet they are, or not to appoint any of these people, but to remove and to hold accountable each other and the pastors and deacons. All right, so that's the end of session 8, corresponding to section 7. That's our basic structure.